Before we dive in, if this story sounds familiar, that's because it is. We covered the holy rollers in a previous video that reached thousands. But this isn't a replay. This is a deeper chapter told through the eyes of someone who actually lived it. Back in 1903, Minerva Kiger Reynolds was just a child when it all began. She found herself caught in something she would never forget. Decades later, she would write down her memories, offering a rare, first-hand account of Corvallis at the turn of the century and of the strange events that unfolded there. Minerva opens her story with this simple disclaimer.
While I remember Corvallis as it was in 1900, as clearly as if I had lived there only a few years ago, I was only an 8-year-old child, and certainly not beyond making mistakes, especially in the exact time that events happened. Please bear with me.
Among all her memories, one night stood out, a night she would never forget. One night, alongside her mother and a neighbor, Minerva stepped into a strange, chaotic gathering inside the old Capitol building in downtown Corvallis, Oregon. The building had been moved several times and now sat, abandoned. What they saw that night was disturbing, and it haunted Minerva for the rest of her life. The people inside called themselves the Brides of Christ Church, but the townspeople gave them a different name, a name that stuck, the Holy Rollers. Years later, Minerva would write about that night, and the man at the center of it all, Franz Edmund Creffield, a self-proclaimed prophet who claimed to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. A man who manipulated his followers, tore families apart, and even took credit for the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. It was Minerva's father, Reuben Kiger, who first coined the nickname Holy Rollers. What began as a sarcastic joke soon made national headlines, thrusting Corvallis into one of Oregon's darkest, most bizarre chapters. But the Kigers weren't just witnesses to history. They were part of its foundation. Reuben helped shape the land that would become Kiger Island, just across the Willamette River. And Minerva's maternal grandmother, Mary Sylvester, was a widowed mother of 4 fighting to hold on to her land claim in the mid-1800s near what is now modern-day Corvallis. As an adult, Minerva put her memories to paper. In 1966, she wrote about her family's early years in Kiger Gorge in the Steens Mountain country of southeastern Oregon. The result was a small book, now archived at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. Originally donated to the Philomath Public Library, the book still bears her signature. But it's her unpublished manuscript, written in 1977 and titled Corvallis in 1900, that offers something far more haunting, a first-hand account of the rise of the Holy Rollers and the man who nearly tore the town apart. This story comes straight from that manuscript. Lightly adapted for clarity, yes, but the voice, the perspective, and the truth are all hers. This isn't fiction. This is a lost piece of Oregon history. And this is Minerva's story. Minerva begins her story of the Holy Rollers with these words.
In 1903, 2 newcomers arrived in Corvallis. One was Franz Edmund Creffield and the other, a man by the name of Brooks.
Neither man was known in Corvallis, but it was Creffield who quickly turned heads. He was small, maybe 30, with sandy, red-tinged hair and pale blue eyes. But it wasn't his appearance that stood out. It was his voice, deep, thunderous, a voice that could shake a room, and he knew how to use it. Looking for a foothold, Creffield and Brooks joined Salvation Army meetings. At first, they were welcomed. Creffield took center stage, singing, praying, preaching like a man on fire. But soon, tension crept in. His energy felt overpowering. The Salvation Army grew uneasy. It wasn't faith they sensed, it was control. Creffield didn't care. He broke away and started his own group. They called themselves the Holy Disciples. Others knew them as God's Holy Few. At first, meetings were quiet, held in followers' homes. But then, they moved into a bigger space, a building with its own strange past. Now, this next part isn't from Minerva's writings, but it helps explain the setting. The building they moved into had once played a short-lived role in Oregon's political history. Back in 1855, Corvallis was briefly, and very briefly, the capital of the Oregon Territory. Oregon City had been the original capital. After much debate, it was moved to Salem. Then in 1855, legislators tried relocating it again, this time to Corvallis. For a few strange days, both houses of the legislature actually met here, but the federal government refused to recognize the change. Within weeks, lawmakers reversed course and returned to Salem, where the capital has remained ever since. The old Capitol building in Corvallis didn't last long in politics. It was moved several times and eventually abandoned, left standing on 2nd Street between Adams and Washington. That's where Creffield set up his new congregation, and it's where Minerva's story picks back up. Now, here's how she remembered it.
It was old and dilapidated, but it would give them more room, so Creffield began meeting there.
It was there that Creffield boldly declared himself Joshua, the prophet, warning that disobedience meant damnation. His congregation was made up mostly of women who believed he was heaven's messenger. He called clothing vile, discarded his own, while followers wore long, modest Mother Hubbard dresses, went barefoot, and let their hair hang loose, defying every social norm. The meetings were loud, emotional, unsettling. Screams, moans, and rolling on the floor became ritual and the talk of Corvallis. Minerva Kiger Reynolds lived just 2 blocks away. She remembered the cries echoing through the night. One night, her mother and a neighbor decided to see for themselves. Minerva recalled,
There was a policeman at the door. He said, "Mrs. Kiger? You too?" Mother replied, "We just came to learn what keeps us awake till 3 in the morning." The officer opened the door and bowed us in. We walked down a hallway, through double doors, and entered their meeting room. No one seemed to notice our presence, and we stood along the back wall. On a platform lay a woman, covered with a sheet. Creffield stood beside her, passing his hands over her, like praying for her to be taken bodily to heaven. Women knelt or sat on the floor, pounding benches and crying, "God, have mercy," or "God will have victory tonight." We saw plenty in a few minutes, and hurried out. The policeman grinned at us.
That summer, as curiosity swelled, Creffield moved his followers to Smith Island, a small, flood-prone patch where the river splits near Kiger Island, just south of Corvallis. No buildings, no neighbors, perfect for isolation. On Smith Island, Creffield and his women built simple shelters, wigwam-like huts made of poles and fir boughs. One large structure became their meeting hall. Smaller ones were for sleeping. A few tents dotted the camp. Minerva's father, Reuben Columbus Kiger, owned sprawling peach orchards on nearby Kiger Island. To save time hauling fruit, he often crossed Smith Island by fording the river instead of taking the ferry. But now, the island was no longer peaceful. It was the Holy Rollers' domain. Minerva remembered what her father saw.
As father crossed the island, the only people we saw were 1 to 3 women, lying under sheets beneath trees, and a few young children playing nearby. The others hid when they heard the river splashing as we crossed.
The men in town knew Minerva's father passed through the camp often, and they started asking him about the so-called holy disciples. His response gave the group a name that would echo far beyond Corvallis. Holy disciples? He scoffed. I call them the Holy Rollers. The name fit, and it stuck. Minerva often rode to town with her father, who brought peaches to market. One day, before they left, he placed a handful of overripe peaches on the wagon seat between them. Minerva didn't get it at first, until they passed the camp.
As we passed the Holy Roller camp, father picked up a peach and threw it at the first woman lying under a sheet. The peach splashed against the fabric, but she didn't move. The same happened with 2 others. Not one flinched.
Her father hadn't done it to annoy them. He believed the women were hypnotized, caught in Creffield's strange spell. And when they didn't move after being struck by a peach, he felt certain he was right. As winter neared, the Holy Rollers slipped back into Corvallis, gathering at the home of Orlando, Victor Hurt. His wife and daughter were devoted followers. Their meetings were held just south of Mary's River, on Fisher Lane, which, at the time, lay just beyond the city limits. Today, that road's known as Southeast Fisher Lane, leading into Crystal Lake Sports Fields in South Corvallis. Back in Corvallis, Creffield's grip tightened, and so did the townsfolk's fear. Minerva watched neighbors transform. Families who once walked to church, neat and tidy, Bibles in hand, suddenly looked unrecognizable. Women went barefoot, hair loose down their backs, dressed in those unmistakable Mother Hubbard gowns. Minerva recalled the shock.
We had some neighbors on our block whom we admired very much. Every Sunday, they passed our home on their way to church. The grown son and daughter walked together, followed by the mother and father, all smartly dressed, and each carrying a Bible. One day, we were shocked when we saw the women pass our house, their hair hanging down their backs, and barefooted.
But it wasn't just looks. To support Creffield's cause, some followers sold nearly everything. Their homes emptied out. Then Creffield made a bold claim. God had commanded him to pick a young woman as the spiritual mother of the church. Some townsmen took matters into their own hands, tarring and feathering Creffield, then forcing him out with a warning. Don't come back. But he came back. He found refuge with the Hurt family. Maud Hurt and her mother hid him in secret. Within days, Creffield and Maud were married. Authorities searched for him, but he stayed hidden. Meanwhile, Maud and her mother were committed to an asylum. Roy Hurt, the Hurts' 12-year-old son, who was living at home with his father, decided to go fishing. He had placed his bamboo pole under the house for safekeeping and went to get it. As he knelt down at the air vent in the brick foundation and reached under the house for the fishing pole, a voice asked, "Maud, is it you?" Roy saw a pair of eyes peering at him from under a mass of shaggy hair. The boy ran out, screaming, and his father and some neighbors came running. Roy insisted that there was a ghost under the house. The men called the sheriff to investigate. Creffield crawled from under the house where he had been hiding. His hair hung to his shoulders and long whiskers covered his face. He had dug a trench which allowed him to stand upright beneath the house. When the Hurt women had learned they were to be taken away, they had brought Creffield a large supply of canned goods and other food, hoping it would last until they returned. But they were gone longer than expected, and Creffield grew hungry. He was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison. While in prison, his wife, Maud, divorced him. After his early release from prison, Franz Creffield immediately went into action. First, he wrote a letter to his ex-wife Maud, who was then living at the home of a brother and his wife in Seattle, asking her to remarry him. She replied that she would, providing he came to Seattle. Creffield then sent letters to his followers, calling them to a meeting to be held in a small grove near Waldport. About 50 attended the meeting. He made the announcement that Esther Mitchell, an attractive young member, would be the second mother of the church. Then he built a fire and threw his clothing into the flames and ordered his followers to do the same. His followers, many in tears, obeyed and dressed again in their modest Mother Hubbard dresses. The prophet was back. Families panicked when they heard. Furious fathers and brothers rushed to the coast, but Creffield vanished before they arrived. Esther Mitchell's brother George swore to kill Creffield and teamed up with another man whose sister was also caught in the cult. They made a deadly pact. Whoever found the prophet first would kill him. The sisters made a pact too. If a brother killed Creffield, that sister would kill her brother. In the meantime, Creffield, went to Seattle, where he and Maud were remarried and were living in a rooming house. One day they walked down a street to a nearby store. Creffield went into the store to make a small purchase, while Maud waited outside. It was there that George Mitchell saw the man he was looking for. He ran up, drew a gun, and shot Creffield in the head. Creffield fell to the floor. Upon hearing the shot, Maud ran in screaming, declaring that George had killed a prophet, her husband, and that he would rise again on the third day. Firmly believing that Creffield would rise again, Maud protested the burial, but nevertheless, he was buried at Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, Washington. He was just 32 or 33 years old. Maud was the only mourner present, aside from the cemetery attendants. George Mitchell, Esther's brother, was arrested for killing Creffield, but was quickly acquitted. As he left town after the trial, Esther emerged and shot him dead, mirroring the very act her brother had carried out. Declared insane, Esther died months after release from an asylum. Creffield's wife, Maud, shattered, took her own life. She was 26 years old. It's been reported that her father, Orlando Victor Hurt, aware of Maud's wish to be buried beside her husband, arranged for Creffield's remains to be moved from his original plot at Lakeview Cemetery to a space next to the one he purchased for Maud. And so ended Creffield's dark reign, a man who twisted faith into fanaticism, leaving heartbreak and death in his wake. The Holy Rollers shocked a nation and put Corvallis on the map, but at a devastating cost. Minerva herself concluded the story with this haunting reflection.
Thus ended the career of a man who had gained the confidence of sincere people through false pretenses. The result was broken homes, sorrow, and even death. The Holy Rollers had become nationally known and had put Corvallis on the map, but at far too high a price.
In an interview with the Gazette-Times, the local Corvallis newspaper, on March 19, 1976, Minerva said she hoped her manuscript about Corvallis would be published someday. Minerva passed away on December 24, 1984, at the age of 92. She was laid to rest in Locke Cemetery in Benton County. Though her story about Corvallis in 1900 was never formally published, we hope this video helps others discover her words, what it was like growing up in Corvallis, and her first-hand encounter with the Holy Rollers. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. Have an idea for a future video? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to support the channel and get access to bonus content, behind-the-scenes updates, or other extras, consider becoming a channel member. Just click the join button below to see what's included. There's plenty more history ahead. We'll see you in the next one.